Hi everybody, this is the Cricket Badger podcast.
Each badger marks the track with its own scent.
His black legs are short but very powerful for digging. The name badger probably comes from the French word bêcher, meaning digger.
Joined as often by Neil Virani, my regular fan badger. Neil, it's been a while actually. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Still floating after the T20 World Cup. So yeah, really can't complain.
Oh, you shouldn't have mentioned that because you shouldn't have won it, should you? It was a 6.
Never. As we know, even when the umpires get it wrong, it's final.
I mean, the amount of Indian fans that have told me that 2019 never existed. Honestly, I mean, we really should go into that deeper. But anyway, that's for another podcast. I have great pleasure introducing Robbie Millar to the podcast as well. Robbie, really good to have you with us. We're going to basically delve into your research and your mind and your knowledge of cricket finances. But to start off with, tell us why you started looking at cricket finances and what your background is a little bit.
Absolutely, yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, James. I'm a long-time listener, so absolutely, brilliant to have me along. And also, think that cricket finance deserves a podcast, which is lovely. But no, I'm a lecturer at Sheffield Hallam University, and for probably the last I'd say 8 to 9 years, I've conducted personal kind of academic research on the finance and economics, one of sport, but then I love my cricket, I love my finance and economics, so why not combine the two? So I've done a number of kind of academic studies with my colleagues, Dr. Dan Plumley and Professor Rob Wilson, on just understanding what the financial model and business model of cricket is, and actually are they sustainable businesses? So we've done a couple of iterations of papers, we've done a couple of conference talks, and I think we've got probably a really good understanding actually what the picture looks like.
Neil, I was woken up this morning. I was up early anyway, but you're having a rampant chat with Lucas, another fan badger in Australia who never seems to sleep, Lucas. And you're talking about global finances and how to maintain Test cricket. So we might come on to that a little bit as we go through. But to start off with, Robbie, I mean, you sent me a list of where counties actually get their money from. And it's 32% the ECB payments, 30% other income, so non-cricket activities like concerts, conferences, the hotels in the grounds and what have you, 15% revenue from major matches, tickets, hospitality and catering revenue from England matches, T20 finals day, etc. 30% from the memberships and the revenue from domestic matches, 10% commercial revenue, sponsorship, advertising, and that kind of malarkey. And just before you come in on that, Robbie, Neil, you said to me before we went live that you were surprised by that a little bit.
Yeah. I suppose there are two things there, and it's probably my accountant's head just coming through straight away. Compared to the other two of the big three, the English cricket world seems the county system is a lot less aligned to the national team compared to how, say, the Shield is with CA and Ranji is with India. So the 32% from the ECB kind of stuck out a little bit. And the other thing, there's 15% from major matches. Now, I may be wrong, but I imagine that is skewed massively depending on whether you're a test hosting ground or not. Because to my mind, there is a two-tier system, pretty much test and 100 hosts and then non-hosts. And the split's going to be fairly different between the two groups.
Absolutely. I'm just going to say, actually, so those figures that you've that I sent over, James, that's from the financial year ending 2022. We haven't quite got all the data for 2023 yet, which is a bugbear of mine, but we'll go on to that another time. And it's
these accountants, Robbie. They're very late finding their information, aren't they?
It's very late. but that is for all the I must say, this financial data doesn't include the MCC, and we made that kind of decision because we just wanted to focus on the 18 professional playing counties. And that is all the revenue itemised together. So you're actually completely correct. That 15%, we've given that split across 18, but actually only 9 counties will generate that revenue. So you're completely correct in that, Neil. That is skewed. That's generated from all your international hosting grounds. When I mean it's slightly skewed, say for example, Surrey, it won't be 15% of their annual revenue. It will be more like kind of 25 to 30%. But you're right, it's diluted. So it's the purpose of kind of why I wanted to break it down was just to give an overall general. This is where county cricket clubs get their money from, essentially, in terms of revenue.
How would you? I see a lot of people describe the ECB money as being a subsidy, a handout, a kind of almost charity. But having worked inside county cricket, I know the amount of work that non-test match hosting counties, as well as the test match hosting counties, do with the ECB to promote the game. And I always see it as a payment for work that's done to promote cricket rather than a handout and some kind of charitable effort.
I absolutely couldn't agree with you more there. I think this is in financial terms, particularly the relationship that the professional county cricket clubs have with their national governing body, which is the ECB in this case. It's a symbolic partnership. They work together, and I think it is pretty unique kind of ecosystem, if we can call it that. If you just take, and again, we're obviously speaking about this, the death of the football, but we'll take the kind of the professional football clubs in terms of the Premier League clubs and the FA. Yes, they work together, but they have no symbolic relationship, actually. Whereas this is a kind of, they're all in this together kind of thing. So the county cricket clubs will develop the players, through their pathways and academy pathways. They invest in that, and then they hand them on to the ECB for the national kind of teams when at whatever kind of point that the ECB see fit. And I think that is completely correct. And it's not a handout in terms of charity. This is us investing in you because we need you to provide players for us to have a successful national team. And think about this from a business perspective. Where do the ECB get their revenue? Well, the majority of their revenue, this is slightly off the top of my head, but say at least 3/4 comes from their broadcasting rights, from Sky, from the domestic deal with Sky and the BBC, and then also on a series by series basis with, if India are touring, it's with the Indian broadcasters, Australian broadcasters, etc. For them to have value in those broadcast contracts, they have to have exciting series. They have to have a product to sell. They do that by having a successful team. So that's the symbolic business relationship that I would view it as kind of a sports economist kind of thing.
Only about half are actually making a profit, though, aren't they? And the counties. Yes, so despite all of that money coming in, in various ways to various counties, many counties are struggling.
Yes, yeah. I think it's really important to note that professional team sports organisations, so, a county cricket club, in this context, don't often make money, as in they're not profitable. I hate using the comparison to football. Football clubs lose millions each year, and even rugby union clubs. And I think this is the framing how the financial health of cricket is. When I say the financial health of cricket, I mean county cricket. I think we need to look at how it's compared to rugby union, because that's a similar size in terms of interest, participation levels, and also kind of revenue levels for the clubs. And actually, they don't do too bad compared to rugby union clubs. And overall, half of the county cricket clubs actually making a profit. I think it's a good thing. Overall, but just going back to this. the ECB payment. And so you think a third of all revenue that the county cricket clubs generate, again, across 18, this is not just for a single club, comes from this annual payment they get from the ECB. And essentially what that is the broadcast and sponsorship rights that the ECB can negotiate. And it's 32%, and it has actually, over the kind of last, I'd say 10 years, what we've got data available for, it's kind of bumbled around the late 20s, early 30s in percentage terms, but the revenue for the county cricket clubs as a whole has increased. So, for example, it was collectively around 140 million in 2014. In 2022, it was 230 million. And when we get the complete data for 2023, it will go up again. So it'll be a new record kind of level. So in absolute terms, it's increased quite markedly. So I have the details here. So in 2020, the ECB gave £50 million to the 18 counties. That's actually gone up to, in 2022, they gave £72 million to the 18 counties. And we might get onto this a bit later on, but that's the impact of the new broadcast deal associated with the 100. The ECB, again, record revenue levels because of that broadcast deal. Therefore, they have more money to distribute to the 18 county cricket clubs.
Forever you and me, right by my side's where you ought to be. 'Cause if I ever were to lose you, I just don't know what I'd do. Let me hear you now.
The amount of counties in debt, though, and some of the size of the debt is quite disturbing. I mean, we see that in football as well, but they've also got more income and the potential to raise their income as well. But when I was working in the game, the amount of pressure to raise the standards, particularly obviously Test match grounds, to get to be Category A and to increase X, Y, Z to be classed as Category A. It's almost like being a 5-star hotel. You have to have certain facilities to be a 5-star hotel. And to be a Category A ground, you have to have the same kind of thing. And clubs have been encouraged to spend, through the nose, millions and millions of pounds to raise the standard of their grounds. And ultimately, that's left them having to pay that back and to be in debt.
So this is the kind of the other side of the equation here, and you're absolutely spot on. I think we can, 10 county cricket clubs, and this is in 2022, by the way. So this is just a kind of a little sample but it's around half are profitable each year. It's a very modest profit at best, really. So we're talking, again, I don't want to, my students do listen to this, they'll be bored about profitability ratios, but we're talking about between 5 and 10%. So for every pound of revenue they generate, they'll get around 5 to 10p in net profit, which is low in business terms, really. Profitability is modest is the key. So that's, on a financial performance side, where we just look at revenue growth and profitability, county's not doing too bad, actually. There is growth there revenue-wise, and then also some make a modest profit. The key where cricket struggles, and again, when I say cricket, English cricket and the county cricket clubs, is their debt position. And this is a worry because, like we've just discussed, that cricket clubs or the county cricket clubs are enticed to, upgrade their facilities by, we're talking tens of millions. That's increase in stadia, that's increase in improvements to playing facilities, having a media centre, having up-to-date floodlights, because also this is the ECB are saying, okay, we're giving you, this is our product in terms of we sell the broadcast rights, therefore, they are worth, the latest broadcast deal was worth £1 billion over 5 years. So Sky are paying for this. What we're going to deliver to them is going to be top quality. So yes, you get a test match. You're going to generate a hell of a lot of revenue through ticket sales, through hospitality, through catering, through your own commercial and sponsorship deals that you can negotiate as a club. But for that, you need to invest in your facilities to ensure we have an excellent product to sell in terms of, the kind of not sporting action on the pitch, but how the grounds look and the facilities attached to it. So that's, major match revenue from hosting international matches is huge business. And for the international hosting counties, that is a key revenue stream for them. Talking in the 20 to 30% of their annual revenue come from hosting one test match. And to put that in perspective, 25 to 30% of their annual turnover comes from 5 to 6 days of, of selling activity, which is, you can say is a good thing, but I see that as an incredible risk. Because what if you get a rained off match? What if you bank on that money coming in and, it might be rained off, it might be cancelled, as we saw the India test match and I think was it 2022 or 2021? Old Trafford and Lancashire would have, planned that revenue coming in into their kind of 2 to 3 year kind of business budget planning, and it doesn't happen. So that's
why when you see a rained off day, you tend to find that most clubs, they try and say, well, we'll keep your money and you can have a ticket for another match, and
absolutely
it keeps that money inside the bank.
Absolutely.
And it's also why the clubs all insure themselves against the rain. Because if they have to refund the tickets, they need to, otherwise you're absolutely in peril. And the likes of Yorkshire, who sometimes miss out on a year of test match cricket, that makes a massive difference to their accounts for that year as opposed to the years either side.
Absolutely you would. And just talk about Yorkshire. So they've got a kind of what I call a fallow year in terms of no test match. They were thinking, okay, we've got to plan this in actually budget wise, because our revenue is going to decrease in this year, in fact, because we hosted an Australia test match last year. We've had a test match every year for several years, and then so they have two. So we're just talking men's here, but they obviously have 3 international days, including the women's. Was it T20 or an ODI against Pakistan? I think it was a ODI. But they have 3 international days. One of them was the T20, the men's T20 against Pakistan, that was rained off. So that has an incredible impact on their finances. But just going back to the debt position. So because the counties, where they're going to fund these infrastructure improvements that we just discussed, well, they can do that by building cash reserves. That's quite tough because not many of them make a profit, and if they do, it's modest, or they have to borrow. So they can either go to the bank and borrow money, or they can. And I think this is a really clever business decision by a lot of county clubs. Is they can usually go to their local authority and they kind of build this in, saying, okay, we are central to the community. If we upgrade these facilities, this is what the local economic benefits will be, and that's actually what Yorkshire were going to do back in the mid 2010s to improve their ground. And the local authorities would usually loan to them, as in lend them the money, and that's what I would call safe debt. What I mean by that is yes, the county cricket clubs must pay it back, and also another key message: debt is fine as long as you can pay it back. And that's, we'll get onto that in a minute, but that's, if they're not making a profit, it's going to be struggling to pay it back.
Local authorities aren't exactly going to send the lads around with baseball bats, are they?
Yeah, so exactly that. And I was having a conversation with the chief exec of a county cricket club during COVID, and because they had borrowed substantial funds from their local authority for ground improvements, the club were really struggling just to make that repayment. Can we have a negotiation in terms of, can we pay half now and half in 6 months? And the local authority would be like, yeah, no. Well, I say no problem. There's a chat to be had there, and they see the value in the county cricket club being there from an economic and a social perspective. Whereas the same chief exec was discussing an issue with a rugby union club that they're involved in, and they their debt was to a private equity fund and then also a bank. And it was a very short conversation, and the conversation wasn't positive. It was, well, you signed up to the terms, you need to pay them back. And ultimately, that rugby union club doesn't exist anymore. So that's just to kind of picture what the. So actually, I think that debt position is a worry, but actually, most of the debt in cricket actually isn't to what I would call private debt. Isn't to banks, isn't to private equity funds.
Just a quick question on that, because I kind of find it interesting that they are borrowing money from the local authority. If you look at the American model, when a team builds a new stadium, usually for $1 billion plus, the city will directly pay like a good 30-40%, considering all the additional business that a better cricket ground would bring in. Would there not be that conversation to be had? So you invest directly without the requirement for repayment.
I was going to say that excellent point. This is that is the fascination between the North American model for team sports and our European model. I would say that exact point between of how essentially the local taxpayer pays for the stadium, I think is everything that is wrong with a commercialization of sport, because essentially, well, it's completely different cultures, I know, but essentially the city pays for the team to bought the bricks and mortar of the stadium, which is we're talking billions pounds or $1 billion worth of stadium, and then the kind of the owners of these franchises then kind of reap the rewards. And I think if cricket got to that, I'm already quite upset sometimes at the state of cricket. I think that might be kind of turn the lights off stage of kind of if we got into that financial situation. But
can you not do it so that the local authority, the local council, does what Neil says, but you then stop that money ever coming out of the club or something like that? So it is a genuine community investment rather than feathering the nest of some big time Charlie who's going to drive off in his Merc.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually the important thing to note here, and we're talking, and this is just a couple of different instances of where not all counties borrow money off their local authority. I think that's important to note. This is just a couple of instances where it has occurred, and I think is actually a good model. The problem going forward is I don't think local authorities have got money to lend now. But I think the point is that compared to America, we're talking in the billions of dollars. Here we're talking £5-6 million. So it's the figures are just a completely at one end and another to us in the scale. And I think it's a good way to do that, because then you're not having to go to a bank and pay 6, 7, 8% on this. You'll be getting a fair deal. And I think that also is really important going forward, because this, I'd say, taking the current political state aside, being invested actually in, say, public sector funding, I think is actually a good way to look at things and fund infrastructure improvements, because then it's not just, okay, we're improving our infrastructure for, to generate more revenue during test matches, which is an absolute thing that should happen, but we're actually using our stadia for community use. And that, just look at Warwickshire's master plan, absolutely, they're ahead of the time actually, or ahead of the trend in terms of doing that, in terms of, okay, during test matches and during cricket activities, we're a cricket ground, but then the other 300 days of the year, we're an educational facility. We've got retail units, we've got cafes. We might have we want to have an NHS surgery here. So actually, it's community use, a multi-use venue that will, yes, you can part fund that from government funding. They look to get levelling up funding in to do that, and that really helps with to finance this infrastructure improvement, and it means they don't get into such poor debt position.
I was at a hospital this morning. It'd been lovely to have looked out the window and watched the cricket match at the same time.
Yeah.
In terms of, you say you're a listener of the podcast, Robbie. I've never made my opposition to the 100 particularly secret.
Yeah.
Purely because I am concerned about the future of the 18 counties and the county system and the ecosystem, and the 18 counties spreading the tentacles around the country and keeping the game thriving everywhere, not just in the metropolis. But everybody or some people say the 100's going to save cricket. The 100's going to basically make sure everything's okay. Is that the truth?
It's an incredibly complex question, which I think the key answer here is there is. The key answer is such a political answer, this, isn't it? There is no way to say yes or no to that question, I think, because it is incredibly layered. And I was just going to say that's why I wanted to we need to understand what the business model of county cricket clubs is first, and then see where the 100 fits in. So let's take the ECB payment that they give each county cricket club. So as we've already discussed, they get that revenue from broadcast deals, from sponsorship rights. So the 100 has absolutely increased revenue within county cricket. So before the 100 in the broadcast deal, and when I say the broadcast deal, they purposely created the 100 to start when the new broadcast deal in 2020, yes, I know it was delayed till 2021, was going to start. So it's like, we're going to align this competition with our broadcast deal. So that's the USP of our new domestic broadcast deal. So the ECB have gone from a £210 million annual turnover to £330 million turnover. So it's increased by at least 110, 120 million every year. So the 100 in terms of broadcast deal is a driver of that, absolutely. How much? We can't actually say, because I know the ECB have done their own kind of estimations, and they say, well, it's worth around, I've noted it down here. So it's worth around 60 to 70 million pounds per year. I'd be interested to see those figures, but I think because it's packaged with everything else, the test matches for men's and women's, and I think that's a really important thing to know, is we can say, okay, the broadcast deal's gone up by 40 million pounds per year, therefore the 100's worth 140 million pounds per year. It's not, because again we have we have the women's matches included in that deal. We have more domestic matches included in that deal, and also the men's test matches and international matches are more lucrative. More people watch international cricket now than the previous broadcast deals were negotiated. So that's an important thing to note. So it's increased revenue. One, has it increased what I call profitability? And I think it's very difficult to answer that question. There is more money coming into the game now, and we just don't have the sample size to say, has it improved the financial health of county cricket?
There is an argument, Robbie, isn't there, that George DeBell and others like myself would suggest that if you include the in inverted commas, the handouts to the counties from the 100 deal in the costs of the 100, it's barely wiping its feet, if not making a loss.
That's because I know, forgive me, I forgot the name of the Worcestershire chief executive did a study into this actually, and what's the cost of the 100. And then what I would say is, I do see the point of including the handouts, but you can't. I don't think you can't give that over as cost, because it's something negotiated in to say, okay, we've got more revenue coming in, therefore actually we're going to give up you as county cricket clubs more of the handouts. And I'm going to say for because it's audio, I'm putting in my inverted commas here. We're giving you more as handouts to support you to develop more players, because we're going to need them for franchises. We're going to need them for. There's more cricket going on that we can sell in terms of broadcast and commercial deals and sponsorships. We need more players, so that's how I would look at it, rather than a direct cost to the ECB. It's
a dividend, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Actually, that's absolutely no. That's how I would look at it. It's a type of dividend to it. Yeah. So if the 18 county cricket clubs are shareholders, type of dividend, absolutely.
I'm still don't support 100.
Could I just chime in on the 100 before we move on? Because again, the point I said before about the differences between the hosting counties and the non-hosting counties. So if I remember right, the dividend was about £1.2 million a year, guaranteed for 5 years. Although they haven't guaranteed it further than the 5 years. But for the non-hosting countries, I mean, yeah, brilliant. They're getting £1.2 million more than they were doing previously, and I know that ECB are very quick to say that they're better off for that. But due to the 100, they're not playing any cricket in August, which is probably the time they'd get the greatest footfall. The T20 Blast, which was a massive income stream, especially for those counties, has been downgraded, certainly in terms of promotion. As far as I've seen, I imagine that their income there has gone down. The ODI Cup is now being played by, second 11s, and they lost their main sponsor because of the downgrading of that competition. So overall, for the non-host counties, would that £1 million cover the loss to other income streams?
One of the previous guests on the podcast said exactly that the kind of the obvious hit in the face, kind of £1.2 million coming into the club is great, but exactly what you just said, the loss in ticket sales, the loss in the concessionary stands, the loss in all sorts of things around the club at various other junctures has often mitigated that.
There's one other thing which I just thought of, which probably hasn't been mentioned. Women's cricket has taken off due to the 100, which is an absolutely brilliant thing. But these non-host counties were the ones hosting women's cricket for a long time, and now those games are getting moved to the big test hosting stadia. So they're losing that due to the. I think Kent and Bristol and Derby were huge grounds for hosting women's cricket previously. In the greatest.
One final point before we let you come back in, Robbie, because me and Neil have just basically answered our own questions here. But one of the other things as well, I think, is that I've actually forgot what my question was going to be. Who owns the 100 teams? Because when it first started out, the 100 teams were going to be a separate entity entirely. They weren't going to be owned by the test match ground. But as we're going to come on to the private equity stuff and things like that, it seems to be the test match grounds that are benefiting, as Neil has just suggested, are benefiting from the revenue that's coming in rather than your Northamptons, your Leicestershires, your Gloucestershires.
I think I'll just take, by the way, all excellent points, and I agree with
We've bombarded you there, haven't we? Sorry.
I was just going to say, Neil's your initial question on every county cricket club, as part of their annual ECB payment, gets an additional 1.2 million after the 100 came into after the 100 was created. So each county cricket club now gets around 4 to 4.5 million each year, which is a substantial amount of money. What I would say is then, okay, what's the knock-on effect? So we talked about the good things, about the increased revenue. What's on the other side of the equation? And you're completely correct. Then we haven't got the exact financial data here yet, because it's only been 2 years of full financial data. But this is more anecdotal. But we are starting to see the T20, the Vitality Blast becoming devalued. I think that is clear to see. And pre-COVID, it was a genuinely important revenue stream. It still is an important revenue stream. But if you've got to think of it. And by the way, when I say smaller county cricket clubs, I absolutely don't mean small in terms of heritage or prestige. I just mean in financial terms. And we're talking about the non-international hosting counties here.
Yeah.
But the smaller county cricket clubs, what do they sell? They sell their 7 T20, their home Vitality Blast matches, they're huge days in their calendar that they will try and sell out their stadia, have additional activities attached onto it, because that's a genuinely, an opportunity to generate revenue. They don't have that many throughout the calendar year. You'd have your Vitality Blast, it might be every Friday in July and August, and that is a perfect amount of time to generate revenue from. Whereas now it's condensed to, it could be May, it could be June, they might even start playing in December pretty soon. But the point is that, there might be 3 T20 home games in a week, and you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to go to 3, I might go to 2, I might go to 1. So those T20 nights they're not losing money, but they are that revenue stream of domestic T20 matches that was very important for the non-international hosting counties. They have to work a hell of a lot harder just to stand still. Is that worth 1.2 million? I don't think so. I think they're still better off with the additional 1.2 million they get from the 100, but it has devalued their product of that, definitely. And as
Neil suggests, though, in year 6, where there is no guarantee, if that money's suddenly taken away and all of those other things have been taken away, then they're left in lumber, aren't they?
Well, I would, if it is taken away, absolutely. But I mean, from a cricket political standpoint, that just cannot happen, and the ECB won't allow that to happen. That's more of a contract thing.
Moving on from that, Robbie. In the same vein, really. I mean, we're going to talk about the private equity investment. The 100 is going to, everybody's talking about this is the biggest thing that's ever going to hit cricket in England in this century or the last 150 years and probably the next 150 years. This is a watershed moment that's going to shape the game forever. If we are extending what we've just been talking about there, that this investment is going to go into the cities, into the test match grounds, and it's not going into these other counties who are already not necessarily losing money, but they are losing certainly prestige and losing their days in the sunshine in August when all the kids are off. This is going to increase the divide, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I think but the key thing to note here is the private equity deal is split equally. I think that's really important to note. I say split equally, that there's a cap quite substantially. But let's just take, and I think it's a perfect segue into the private equity deal, actually. So let's just take it on face value. So the reported figures for the sale of the private equity is 450 million to 500 million pounds for 49% of the franchises. Actually, that just to go back to answer a previous question I had, James, who owns the franchises? Actually, the ECB own them. So they're what I would call phantom organisations, in terms of you can. I'm sad I do this. I look at them on Companies House. So the companies are registered. So we'll take, as a Yorkshireman, we'll take Northern Superchargers. That is registered to Lords, which are the ECB's offices. So they get, I think their annual turnover is something like £1.6 million. Their costs are £1.6 million. So they ECB put in what they need to put in to generate what they wipe their face in terms of cost. That's who owns them. So they're owned by the ECB. So they are ultimately the ECB's to sell.
Who gets the ticket revenue then if Hallam is sold out for a Northern Superchargers game?
The ticket revenue goes to the ECB. As they own the franchise. So if you have and that's actually another important thing to note. If you're a 100 hosting county, so again with Northern Superchargers in terms of Yorkshire. So what's Yorkshire's financial benefit to hosting the Northern Superchargers matches? Well, they will receive a staging fee. So like, okay, this is our house. We're renting it out for 15 days for you to come and host your event on here. They will get the catering and merchandise sales in ground, and that's about it. That's and also hospitality sales in ground as well. But
that's not insignificant, though, Robbie, is it?
No, it's not insignificant. But for example, let's take an Ashes Test match, which is the highest of high in terms of revenue generation. So that's, and again, Yorkshire, that would probably be worth in the region of £6 to £7 million for in terms of all in, hospitality, catering, ticket sales. And I don't want to put a figure on it, but you think like in terms of their hosting, what revenue they're going to generate from a 100 match, we're talking in the tens to 100,000. So it's not absolutely huge business, is what my point I'm trying to make. But listen, it is. But
it takes them £100,000 further away from Derbyshire or Leicestershire, doesn't
it? Yeah. Ultimately, the 100 places more money in the rich than it does the poor, and that's an analogy. As in, it's putting more money in the richer counties.
So where's cricket's Robin Hood, Robbie? Where's cricket's Robin Hood?
It's that Badger style.
Hopefully you're enjoying the podcast so far. This is actually going a little bit further, longer than I was anticipating, for a good reason. There is lots to talk about. I think Neil and particularly Robbie are very, very informed on this subject. So we've taken you through where counties actually get their money from. We've gone through the 100 and the financial repercussions of that so far. And we kind of started to scratch the surface of the private equity investment into the 100 teams. And we'll extend that into the second part. We'll look at who that's going to be good for. Who is it going to be bad for? Is it going to be good for the game, bad for the game, bad for sectors of the game, some of the smaller counties? Is there going to be that divide as the game continues? And also, as we go through the discussion, we'll extend it into world cricket as well. The finances of world cricket, the smaller nations, can they survive? Do they need a bigger chunk of the pot internationally as well? So an interesting part 2 still to come, where we look forward at the private equity investment into the 100 and the global game and the sustainability financially, particularly for some of the smaller countries. So tune in for part 2 very soon indeed.